silence in Christian Gray's penthouse wasn't like the silence on the other floors of the building. It was thick, heavy, as if the walls absorbed the sounds before they reached the ears, as if even the air breathed in a minor key. The panoramic glass windows looked out over humid, dense Seattle. The city seemed submerged in a restless fog. Far below, car headlights cast flickering trails of light that glided like ghosts between the concrete blocks. Christian stood in front of the glass wall, a glass of whiskey between his fingers. The amber liquid didn't waver. His hand was steady, almost artificial. He didn't drink for pleasure. He drank because it was the most human gesture he had left in the lonely early mornings. It was almost midnight. Behind him, the penthouse gleamed with architectural perfection. Furniture with clean, almost surgical lines, black leather upholstery, imported Venetian marble, carefully lit works of art, an impeccable environment, and absolutely sterile of affection. Christian lifted his glass and took a sip. The taste was familiar, but distant, as if it didn't belong to him, as if his palate had been trapped in another time, a time when things still had taste, weight, consequence. He ran his fingers over the remote control embedded in the wall. The security system's digital screen came up silently. Horizon Technologies had upgraded it that afternoon. The technician, a short man with quick eyes, had assured him that the new system included predictive algorithms, real-time monitoring, and fail-safe interlocks. With that version, Mr. Gray, not even the building itself could fool you. Christian didn't answer. He just signed with his thumb and dismissed the man. Now, I looked at the logs for the last hour. Everything normal. But there was something about normality that bothered me. It was like a stage set too far before the tragedy. He turned off the screen, twirled the glass in his fingers once more, and turned toward the hallway that led to the private elevator. His shoes tapped rhythmically on the dark wood floor, echoing briefly before being swallowed by the silence of the penthouse. It was time to head down to the bottom level, where I kept physical confidential contract documents, away from any cloud servers. The elevator was there, discreet, almost camouflaged against the marble wall. The brushed steel doors had no buttons, just a biometric scanner. Christian positioned his finger. Access granted, Mr. Gray. The system's female voice came softly, but this time there was something odd about the cadence. A slight hesitation, almost imperceptible, as if the machine had thought before responding. The doors opened. He walked in. The interior of the elevator was a black space of leather and metal. The side lighting created soft shadows, as if the room was not completely illuminated, only partially revealed. Christian glanced at the interior panel. No buttons were visible. The control was voice-controlled. Basement, he said. The elevator obeyed. It started to go down. For the first few seconds, everything went as normal. The feeling of a slight shift in the stomach, the slight hiss of the engine, the reflection in the back mirror following his movements perfectly. And then it stopped. Abruptly, the lights blinked twice, like eyes trying to stay open. The digital display froze on a strange number. Level 43. Christian frowned. Level 43, he whispered. There's no such thing. The building had 38 floors. No 43rd floor. No intermediary between the basement and the official records. He tried to give another command. Continue descent. Silence. Basement. More silence. The panel was unresponsive. He approached the door and tried to force it open manually. The mechanism was stuck. And then the lights went out completely. For a second. 2. 3. In the pitch black, Christian felt something. Not a physical presence, but a memory, as if the air around you whispered with its own breath. The lights came back on, and I was no longer alone. A woman was there, in the corner of the elevator, head down, barefoot, wearing a dark, ancient dress. The fabric seemed woven from the night itself. Christian stepped back instinctively. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, her face still hidden by her hair. Her hands crossed on her lap. "How did you get in here?" "Nothing." The silence was so thick it felt like it was about to burst your eardrums. He looked at the mirror behind her. The reflection showed the same woman, but the details were different. In the mirror, she looked at him, eyes open, deep, painful, and family. His heart raced. He recognized those eyes, even though I couldn't yet associate them with a name. She slowly raised her head. The face appeared like a memory being carefully unearthed. "Christian," she said, in a tone that sounded like a lament. "Why did you forget me?" The world stopped. Time has stagnated. Christian felt the words pierce his chest like shards of glass. He tried to answer, but the words didn't come. The lights flickered again, and then she disappeared. It just disappeared. The elevator doors opened, revealing the penthouse, the room he had been in minutes before, untouched, exactly as he had left it. The display now read 033 coverage. He looked around. On the bar, the glass of whiskey, still full. No fingerprint, no sip given, as if I had never left there. Christian approached the mirror in the living room. His reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The man in the mirror looked calmer, more comfortable in that world of silence and darkness. The penthouse clock had stopped, 034, but Christian knew that was a lie. He walked slowly back to the main hall, his steps stiff, his body feeling as if it were carrying another person's weight on its shoulders. The world around him seemed the same. The impeccable paintings, custom-designed curtains, the expensive silence of modern architecture. But something subtle had changed. The air was thicker, as if gravity had been reprogrammed. He passed the mirror in the living room again. He stopped. He pressed his fingers against the glass. The reflection was no longer synchronized. His own gaze seemed to hesitate a second longer than necessary. A late blink, a gesture out of step, little slips that only someone like him, a man obsessed with control, would notice. The heart was beating fast. Try to rationalize. Stress, fatigue, maybe a neurological lapse. He went to the security center, installed behind a panel in the office. He punched in the access code, 3-3-3-0, the same number he used for emergency locks. The system opened like a digital treasure chest, revealing the essence of the penthouse. Every camera, sensor, and recorder there. No network. Isolated. Pure. He searched the elevator files. It went back to 2359. Jumped to 034. The middle section was corrupt. The system recorded the following. Error 203. File compromise / unknown source. That never happened. He repeated the command. Nothing. Manually called the backup protocol. Nothing. Every attempt to access the data resulted in failure. The message flashed red. The system, normally passive and obedient, now seemed to act autonomously, as if it were intentionally hiding something. Christian frowned. Something inside him was beginning to grow restless. There was a part of his mind, the one he had stifled with discipline and logic, that was starting to scream. A part that was saying, this isn't just a technical glitch. Decided to go deeper. Unlocked the analog monitoring room, behind a fake bookshelf. He pressed a small push button and pushed the wall open. The hidden door creaked softly. Inside, a single monitor, connected to an exclusive power source. A separate system that recorded coverage data in real time, without depending on the network. He manually rewound the digital tape from the elevator camera. 001. The doors open, and sees it. Christian Grey, standing in the center of the elevator. Motionless, expressionless. But there was something wrong. In the video, he doesn't get out of the elevator. He stands there, staring at the camera, in silence, for more than half an hour. Frozen, glazed eyes, static body. Christian, the real one, the one watching the recording, felt a chill run down his spine. That was impossible. He was here now, back at the penthouse. He was back, but the video said something else, as if a part of him had never left that space, as if something or someone occupied his body inside. The image was real, raw, and the most disturbing thing was the look his double had on camera. It was a soulless look. There was no doubt, no fear, no anger, just absence. He turned off the monitor abruptly. He left the room and locked himself in the bathroom. He splashed water on his face. His skin looked paler. He was breathing with difficulty. He looked up, and he saw, on the mirror, fogged by artificial humidity, there was something written with the fingertip. Descent. The letters appeared slowly, as if they were still being traced. But no one but him was there. He passed his hand over it. The word did not disappear. It wasn't a reflection. It was on the other side of the glass. He stepped back, his back colliding with the cold wall of the bathroom. And then, in the center of the mirror, a crack. Thin, slow, deep. The line ran from the top to the bottom edge, splitting your face in two, without breaking the glass, as if the mirror were alive. He left the bathroom in a hurry. He walked back into the living room, his heart pounding against his chest like fists locked against a door. He stopped in front of the elevator. I knew I had to go back there. There were answers in that place, or madness, or both. He looked at his watch. 0:55. For the second time that night, he placed his finger on the scanner. The doors opened without a sound. He came in. Basement, he said. The elevator did not respond, but it came down, alone. No commands. This time, the floors did not pass quickly. It was a gentle descent, dense, as if time needed to take a deep breath between each number. On the display, the negative floors appeared. -1, -2, -3, -4, and then it stopped at -7. The lights went down. The air got colder. The elevator seemed narrower. And then, without warning, music started playing. Violin, slurred notes, slow, out of tune by a millimeter, enough to make the listener uncomfortable. Christian recognized the melody, not by name, but by feeling. It was the song Cassandra used to play. He didn't know how he knew, but I knew. The doors did not open, but a voice whispered, coming from all directions. "You're back early, Christian." It was the same voice, soft, almost gentle, but loaded with sadness, or memory. He looked around, his chest tight. "Who are you?" No response, until the voice came again, but now right next to my ear. "I am the memory you tried to erase." He closed his eyes, and he saw. She, for a second, a flash, a moment, the woman in the elevator, Cassandra, not like a nightmare, but as a souvenir. The elevator lights returned to normal with a soft pop, but something about him was no longer the same. Christian stood still, breathing heavily. He wasn't sure if he had actually heard that voice or if it was all in his head. A memory waking up like an animal that had been pretending to sleep for years. The panel showed -7. The elevator was stopped. And yet, everything inside him seemed to spin slowly, as if gravity were tilting toward another center. The doors opened, but they did not reveal a traditional corridor, nor emergency stairs, nor a technical floor. They revealed a mirror, giant, floor to ceiling, smooth, lit by an amber light that seemed to pulse like a heart. The mirror reflected only Christian, alone. He took a step forward. Her shoes hit a cold, uneven floor that echoed even with slight movements. The air smelled of old metal and flowers, a subtle but unmistakable scent, gardenias, the fragrance Cassandra used to wear. He stood in front of the mirror and stared at his own reflection. There was nothing strange about his features. His hair was still neat. His dark tie was in place. But his gaze seemed out of place, as if the reflex was delayed. He raised his right hand. The reflex did too, but with a delay of thousands. And then it came into being, first in the mirror, then in memory. She, Cassandra, the woman who shouldn't be there, the woman he had buried not in a cemetery, but in the folds of his own past, among contracts, acquisitions, and soundproof walls. In the mirror, she was standing behind him, barefoot, wearing a black dress, her hair loose like waves of floating ink. But when he turned around, there was no one there. Only the reflection showed its presence. "It's not possible," he murmured. He turned back to the mirror. She was still there, closer now. He could feel the heat of her body, even though he knew she didn't exist outside that glass. And then she spoke, just in reflection. "Do you remember what you promised me?" The voice was soft, tired, hurt, but serene. Christian took a step back. He swallowed hard. "This is a hallucination." She gave a half smile, not a mocking one, a sad smile, from someone who no longer expected understanding. "This is where you erased me. In that reflection, when you decided that loving me was too dangerous for your image." He closed his eyes. Images came, fragmented. A grand piano in a house overlooking the sea. Her hands over his. A whisper in the dark. "Do you swear you'll never let me be forgotten?" And your silence as an answer. When he opened his eyes, the crack was there. In the mirror, a thin line, starting from the top and descending, trembling, to the ground. A dark substance was dripping from it. It wasn't blood. It wasn't ink. It was something thicker. Liquid memory. Christian took a step back, but he couldn't move away from the mirror. Cassandra, or her image, approached until she was millimeters from the glass. "You didn't erase me, Christian. You just locked me away where you never wanted to look again. Here, in the reflection of what you don't admit to being." She reached out and touched the mirror. It was a gentle touch, but it created a metallic, vibrating sound, as if she were touching the soul of the elevator itself. "And now you're back, voluntarily. That changes everything." "Why now?" he asked. She sighed. "Because, for the first time, you wanted to remember. The real descent is not in the building. It is in you." The lights flickered. For a second, the mirror went completely dark, and when he came back, she was no longer there. Just your reflection, alone. But now smile. Christian touched his chest. His heart was beating faster, as if it was fighting against the body that contained it. The elevator enveloped him again in its quilted darkness. The doors closed. The display flashed red. "Next stop, 033 coverage." The elevator began to rise, but the silence inside now had another density. It was a silence filled with echoes, as if every sound from the past, every word left unsaid, every tear swallowed, was being returned drop by drop. And in the mirror in front of me, for a split second, Christian saw Cassandra smile at him, inside his own eyes. When the elevator doors opened on the penthouse, Christian didn't step out immediately. He remained still, with his hands trembling slightly. He stared at the hallway in front of him, as if he no longer belonged there. The room looked the same. The furniture was in the same place. The lights, the decorations, the silence. Everything was as he had left it. But something in him had changed. Or rather, something in him had awakened. He ran his hand over his face, as if trying to remove an invisible veil. He felt double. Part of him was still in the elevator. Part of him was still walking on the cold marble of the penthouse. And another part, perhaps the most alive, whispered that none of this was coincidence. The clock on the mantelpiece remained frozen. 0:34. Same time as before. Time refused to move on. As if the floor he was on no longer existed in real time. As if his penthouse had become a waiting camera. He went to the bar. He served whiskey, but he didn't drink. The smell of the drink made him sick. The liquid in the glass looked darker than usual, as if it had been drawn from a cellar, not a bottle. He left the glass on the counter, and then he acted. With firm steps, he crossed the room to his private library, where he kept physical files, rare works, and, most importantly, the building's plans. He pulled out the bottom drawer. A black leather file lay there, and it were all the technical documents for the Phoenix 78, his greatest architectural pride. He opened the floor plan and spread the sheets out on the table. He examined floor by floor, basements, support columns, expansion zones. But when he reached the base, on the levels below the parking lot, he saw something. A strange note in the bottom corner. Small, discreet, a spiral, the same symbol carved into the door where Cassandra had been, the same one that had briefly appeared on the elevator's digital interface. And just below the drawing, a handwritten line, almost illegible. Level 43. Restricted access / Plan B. Do not install panel. Christian frowned. What do you mean by don't install the panel? He picked up his cell phone and looked up the contact details of the engineer responsible for the construction, Robert Ainsley, a meticulous man of few words, retired for years. He called. The phone rang 4 times. Answered. Hello, Mr. Ainsley. This is Christian Grey. Ah, the voice on the other end sounded surprised, but tense. I thought you'd never call. Christian ignored the provocation. I need to talk about a floor. A floor that doesn't exist. Level 43. Silence. Christian straightened up. So he's real. It depends on what you call real. Ainsley coughed. It's buried beneath layers of steel, concrete, and contractual silence. You've been warned. I never knew that. Yes, he knew. In part, he preferred not to ask what was below the basements. He signed the contract with blank clauses. Remember? Disregard technical items of the central core. That was the euphemistic name. Christian felt his blood run cold. I remembered, but he never gave it any importance. It was just another technical contract. What's there? The engineer's breath failed. That was built before any of us. The original foundation of the land was already there when the first tower was designed. A kind of hollow, isolated space, whose function no one could explain. The owners wanted to keep it. We complied. Part of the contract was that no one would talk about it. Christian pressed the phone to his ear. Elevator technology is accessing that level. Ainsley said, it's memory, like this. It doesn't operate on mechanical logic. The space adapts. It's like an extension of the occupant's mind. You opened the door because you were ready. Ready for what? I don't know. But it doesn't open for nothing. Christian was silent. Are you saying I activated this? I'm saying it was always there. And now he's chosen to respond. The call dropped. No noise. No warning. Christian dropped his cell phone on the table without realizing it. Across the room, the mirror reflected her face. But in the reflection, he smiled. A slow smile. Precise. That wasn't yours. That night, at 0:33, he returned to the elevator, speechless, without hesitation. The door opened by itself. Christian entered. The mirror inside reflected nothing. Neither does he. The elevator felt like a cocoon. He closed his eyes and waited. The lights went down. The music returned, the same violin melody, and before the descent began, a voice rang out, calm and definitive. Now that you've heard it, you can't pretend anymore. The descent stopped. The elevator display, which had previously flickered between negative numbers, now simply disappeared. In place of the digits, there was a blank screen. No number, no direction, just suspended time. The doors opened slowly, revealing a gray corridor covered in raw, damp concrete, as if it had never been finished. There was no finishing, no visible electric light, only small yellow bulbs attached to the ceiling in an irregular manner, as if someone was improvising lighting inside a bunker. The air was still, loaded with dust and cold. Christian felt his heart pounding in his chest, as if it were trying to escape before him. But he knew there was no turning back. He walked slowly. As he walked, the walls of the hallway revealed marks, faded symbols, crossed out words, phrases written in charcoal or dried blood, some illegible, others frighteningly clear. Never under 43. Memories don't die. She still plays. Christian stopped in front of a metal door at the end of the hallway. It looked like it had been welded shut, but in the center was the same old spiral. He reached out his hand. The door opened without resistance. Inside, a room. Simple, almost delicate. A grand piano, covered in a gray canvas. A chair. A yellowed sheet of music. A bouquet of dead flowers on the shelf. And in the center of the room, Cassandra. She was sitting at the piano, her back straight, her dark hair loose. She was wearing the same black dress he had seen in the reflection, but now she was clear, real, or at least more real than any memory. She didn't look at him. It just played, a slow, familiar melody, the same one he couldn't forget. Christian didn't move. Let the sound fill the space, and in each note, a memory. Summer on the French coast, the touch of her fingers on the back of his neck as he read. The day she said, "You just have to love me as I am, without molding, without training, without hiding." His response, silence. "I thought you were dead," he said finally, his voice hoarse. She stopped playing. He didn't turn around. "I died, Christian, but not in the way you understand." He took a step forward. "Why here?" "Because this is where you locked me. In the space between what you admit and what you deny. You built this building, and inside it a safe. And inside the safe, your guilt." She stood up. "Now yes." He turned around. Intense eyes. Sad, but firm. "I asked for your help. You chose your name, your empire, your silence." Christian clenched his fists. "I didn't know what to do. I thought you were going to destroy me. I wasn't going to destroy you. I was going to show you who you were." She smiled bitterly. "And you couldn't bear it." The sheet music on the piano flew away with a gust of air. She walked towards him, stopping just a few inches away. "You still have a choice, Christian. Choose what? Which version of you will continue to exist? The one you feel, or the one that pretends to be unattainable?" He looked down. The black velvet ribbon was on the floor between the two of them, the same ribbon she wore on her wrist. That one day he pulled slowly, in a moment of absolute trust. The ribbon that said, "With it, you can dominate me. Without it, you have to respect me." He knelt down and picked up the ribbon. He looked at her. "I want to fix this. Then you need to go down further." Christian frowned. "More than that?" She nodded. "To where there are no more mirrors. Where only you remain." The lights in the room flickered. The piano closed with a dull thud. The sound echoed like a warning. She reached out and touched his chest with her fingertips. "Up there, your reflection lives. Down here, your truth waits. Choose." The elevator door opened behind him. The panel was active again. Floor -43, ready for access. Christian took a deep breath. He passed the velvet ribbon through the cuff, and he entered the elevator. The elevator doors closed behind him like the seal of a tomb. Christian didn't say a word. It was no longer necessary. The panel glowed a deep red, like blood under glass. Authorized access, floor -43. So it began, the descent, but not like the previous ones. This time the elevator seemed to move through another substance. The sound of the motor was muffled, as if it were rotating in thick water. The walls of the compartment trembled gently, as if they were resonating with an internal frequency. His frequency. In the mirror, something new. There was no more reflection. None. Not the light. Not Christian. Just a black space, absorbing everything. He reached out to touch the glass, and his skin was swallowed by darkness, as if dipped in liquid ink. He narrowed his eyes. The pressure in his ears was increasing with every second, as if he were descending below sea level, as if he were leaving the surface of consciousness. And then, the elevator stopped. No sound. Without warning, the doors opened, but they didn't reveal a common walk. What appeared before Christian was a space with no defined architecture. It was vast, but had no walls. It was dark, but not completely dark. The light here came from within things, from the memories that emerged around him, like scenes suspended in time. On the right, an old kitchen, Cassandra's, pot boiling, classical music playing in the background, her dancing with her back to him with a glass of wine. On the left, the room where she cried with her head between her knees. In the center, an unmade bed, an open window, and a note written in shaky letters. If you don't come by 3 a.m., I'll know I was just another one. Christian fell to his knees. The air there was heavier than lead. The scenes floated around him like silent witnesses. This is what you locked up, said a voice. It was her, Cassandra. But now, its presence was more diffuse. It was part of the environment, part of the space between one memory and another. She walked between scenes calmly, as if she knew every step by heart. Here is everything you wanted to forget. All the doors you never opened. All the cries for help you pretended not to hear. I couldn't handle it, he said in a low voice. You didn't want to deal with it. She corrected. You were afraid, and you used power as an escape. He closed his eyes. She knelt before him. But now you have come down. No one comes down here without intention, without a desire for reparation. Christian looked her in the eyes, for the first time, without a shield. Tell me what to do. She touched his chest with 2 fingers. You have to choose which part of you will continue. I don't understand. The reflection that was left up there, that Christian, still walks. Answers phone calls. Signs contracts. But he is empty. A shell. A functioning ghost. And me, you are what you feel. What fell. What descended. What will no longer be accepted in that world if you return like this. Silence. She stood up and pointed to a new door that appeared ahead. Simple. Made of wood. No symbol. No technology. That's the return door. Where to? To a world where you can never lie to yourself again. He hesitated. What if I don't go? Then the reflection will continue, and you will remain here, with me, between what was and what will never return. He looked both ways. To the door. For Cassandra. He closed his eyes, and he walked. At the top, at 033, Christian Gray's reflection woke up in front of the mirror. I was standing, but something in him had changed. The eyes were wet. A trace of humanity passed through the mask. He touched his own face. He smiled, but for the first time, the smile looked real. The mirror accompanied him. No delays, no shadow, no distortion. On floor 43, Cassandra sat down at the piano and began to play. Alone. but now without sadness. The melody was the same, but there was hope in the notes, as if finally he had chosen to descend, to ascend as another man. The sound of the piano still echoed in the depths of level -43 when Christian walked through the door. It was a simple door, like those in an old house, made of aged wood, without a lock, without biometrics, without an electronic voice. A gesture of humility, the opposite of everything that had surrounded his life. When he crossed it, he felt no pain or disorientation, just a clean void, as if someone had removed the layers of concrete, contracts, and denial that kept him isolated from himself. Up there on the roof, Christian's reflection opened his eyes. I was standing in front of the mirror in the main hall. For the first time, I didn't know what to do. For days, or weeks, perhaps longer, he had functioned as a puppet of perfection. He walked, smiled, signed, made decisions. Every gesture programmed, precise. An empty avatar, sustained by habits. But now something had broken. The phone rang, and he didn't answer. Meetings were ignored. The rooftop lights remained on all night, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. And there he stood, in the mirror, waiting for the return of something I couldn't name. In the elevator, Christian woke up. I didn't know if I had fallen asleep, passed out, or died for a moment. The fact is that he was standing. The panel glowed. Rising roof, 033. The doors opened. The coverage was the same, but it wasn't the same. The light seemed more yellow, less clinical. The air was lighter. Even the silence had a new texture, as if it could now be heard without fear. And in the hall mirror, Christian saw himself, but not the empty reflection. It was him, with the marks of the descent, with darker eyes, with an open chest. On the other side of the mirror, the ancient reflection also saw him. They both stared at each other for long seconds, and then, without words, the reflection smiled and disappeared. Christian walked around the room like a man stepping into his home for the first time. He touched the furniture as if he recognized it now. He looked at the paintings, the textures, the wood. It was as if he was only now truly there. He went to the bar. He served whiskey. It smelled. He took a sip, and for the first time, he tasted it. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. There was a return. There was presence. There was a man where before there was only appearance. On the central screen of the house, a message flashed discreetly. It wasn't from the security system. It didn't come from Horizon Technologies. Just a notification without a sender. You remembered. She heard. Christian deleted the message, but he didn't smile. There was still too much pain to celebrate. But deep down, very deep down, there was peace. At level -43, the piano remained silent. Cassandra was no longer there. The room still existed, but now as a clean echo, like the room of someone who no longer lives there. The velvet ribbon still rested on the sheet music, but without charge. Just as a reminder, at the penthouse, 033 the following night, Christian approached the elevator. He knocked on the door. She didn't open up, and he didn't try to force it. He just stood there, eyes closed, for a minute. Then he turned his back, walked to the mirror, looked at his own reflection, and said softly, "Thanks." The reflection smiled, and he reciprocated. The rooftop clock is working again. After nights frozen at 033, the hands finally moved forward. 034, 00:35. The house breathed differently, as if the space itself felt that something essential had been reorganized. The architecture, previously cold and authoritarian, now seemed inhabited, not just for one man, but for an awakened conscience. Christian Grey was sitting on the edge of the bed, the same one where, for years, he had slept lightly, as a planner, watched over by memories and ghosts. But that night, there There was no shadow, just silence, a welcoming silence. He did something he hadn't done in a long time. He opened the drawer of the dresser next door. There, among old letters and forgotten objects, he found the only physical photo that remained of Cassandra. It wasn't clear. They were laughing, awkward, a little out of focus, sitting on the grass in a park he couldn't name. But his eyes in the image said it all. Before the fear, before the fame, before the armor. He ran his fingers along the edge of the photo as if touching something alive. Then he placed it on the nightstand and left it there. Sample. At 0:33, the elevator made a sound. No warning, but called. Christian walked up to him. The doors were ajar. On the panel, level -43, not accessible. He didn't come in. He just walked over and rested his forehead against the cold steel of the door. "Thank you," he murmured. On the other side, there was no response. But he felt it. He felt that whatever was down there, the room, the memory, Cassandra, had come to an end. Not because he forgot her, but because, after all, he honored her. The next morning, the world moved on. Business, meetings, messages. But Christian Grey was not the same anymore. He spoke less. I listened more. I signed fewer contracts and read more pages. He started playing the piano again. Little melodies, wrong notes, attempts. But every sound was true. Some employees noticed the change. The cadence of his steps was different. The look more human. And the smile, when it appeared, was rarer, but more real. One day, alone, he walked to the elevator mirror. He stopped in front of him, and he looked at himself. He didn't look for flaws. I wasn't looking for control. Just looked, like meeting an old friend. And for the first time, he saw not a reflection, but a man. Imperfect, full of memories, capable of love, capable of failure, able to return. At the base of the building, in the archives never consulted, retired engineer Robert Ainsley, in his silent home, leafed through the Phoenix 78 blueprints for the last time. He smiled. In the corner of one of the sheets, where there had been a spiral, there was now a single word, handwritten, closed, and on level -43, where the sound of the piano once echoed, where a woman sat waiting to be remembered. There was only silence and peace. The velvet ribbon remained there, untouched, like a promise fulfilled. And when the lights finally went out, there was no darkness. There was an end, simple and whole.